Code it now. Write a program to fill an array with even numbers from 0 to 50. Print the array. So let's switch over to our JGrass window, start a new file with Control-N, hit Enter to accept Java as the default language. Now let's go back to an old file, doesn't really matter which. Copy with Control-C, go back to the untitled window and paste with Control-V. Now we can change the name at this top level comment. So instead of ice cream, we want something like EvensTo50. And of course, we'll also change the name in the class declaration. So EvensTo50. Okay. And now we want to get rid of the old content inside this main method. We're not going to need this anymore. All right. So let's see. We want to write a program to fill an array with even numbers from 0 to 50. So the first thing that you have to consider is that whenever you declare an array, you need to have some sort of size for the array. Whether you're just filling in values through the curly braces, obviously you need to have the exact values, and by using the exact values, you're telling, Java that, hey, there are 5 items, and that's the size of my array. Or you do it through the new int and then the brackets, and then you put in the actual number value of how many you plan on having in that array. So in this case, there are a few ways you can go about figuring out how many even numbers there are from 0 to 50. You can write some code to do that using a for loop, and we've done something like this in a past codeIt now activity, and it's pretty straightforward, and it's a short for loop. It's not hard to do. Or you could just reason about it. So let's think about how many even numbers there are from 1 to 50. So from 1 to 50, it's actually just an even split. So if you consider 1, 2, 3, 4, they always come in pairs. Odd, even, odd, even, odd, even. So from 0 to 50, it's split, from 1 to 50, it's split exactly in half. In other words, from 1 to 50, there are 25 even numbers and there are 25 odd numbers. So now all we have to consider for 0 to 50 is, what is 0? Is it an even number or is it an odd number? Usually, most people would say 0 is an even number. So that's what I'm going to say. And in this case, that means there are 25 plus 1 even numbers from 0 to 50, which is just 26 even numbers from 0 to 50. So now let's use this information to create the new array. So int array, and let's just call this evens, right? Equals new int array. And we're going to fill it in with the value 26, because that's what we reasoned about. But of course, like I said, you could write your own for loop to count the number of even numbers from 0 to 50, and then use that value to create the array. And then the other thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to have an index into evens, because we're going to have a for loop, and we're going to use the for loop to find the values, right, that are even, that we're going to want to stick into the array. But then we also need just an index for the array itself. So we're just going to call this array index count. And obviously we started at 0 because arrays are, they start their index from 0. Okay, and then the next thing we're going to want to do is create the for loop. Now, for this for loop, there are 2 ways of going about it. One way is to write out a for loop like this. So we can say for int I equals 0, as long as I is less than or equal to 50. I plus plus, so this is the very standard from 0, less than or equal to a certain number, and then we just increment I by 1 each time. And then what we can do is inside the for loop, we can add some logic saying if, and then some logic that says if I is an even number, then store I into evens at the index count and increment count. That's one way of doing it. But if you want even shorter code where you don't even need an if statement that checks whether I is even, you could just tell the for loop to instead automatically increment through all the even numbers by doing I plus equals 2. And we've done something like this in past codeIt now activities. So now what we're telling the for loop is, hey, I want you to just iterate through the even numbers. Don't even bother going through 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. I want you to go from 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, etc. So that's what we're going to do. So then we can say evens count, because remember we're using count as the index into the evens array, and we want to store these even numbers that we're iterating through using I in our for loop. So we want to store I, semicolon, and then we want to make sure that we increment count, because otherwise we would just be continuously storing at index 0 for the evens array. And for count, we just want to increment by 1 because we want to go through every piece of evens. We want it to go to every part of the array rather than skipping 2. All right, so now that we've figured out that, now all we need to do is print the array. So to print the array, we can actually use another for loop. But before we do that, let's just write in some comments to make it clear what we're doing here. So we can just say something like iterate over the even numbers between 0 and 50. Store them in an array. Okay, and then we can add another comment here explaining that print each array element on a new line. All right, so to do this, we can just use a for loop. So for int I equals 0. And as long as I is less than evens.length, so remember when we want to access the length of an array, we use the dot length, and it's a field instead of a method, so we don't need these parentheses, we just use the word. And we want to use less than instead of less than or equal to, because remember, arrays are indexed from 0, meaning they go from 0 to the length minus 1, not from 1 to the full length. And then we do an I++. Then we need our curly braces. Okay. And now we can fill in what we actually need here. So we're going to do a system.out.println. And then we will do a... And then I think we can actually just go ahead and even... Yeah, we can just print out the value. We don't really need to print out any text with it, I would say. So we can just say evens. I, and that's it. And there we go. So that'll print out each of the values in the array, each on its own line. So now we can save this file with Control S, accept the defaults with Enter, compile it with Control B. That's good, so compiled successfully. And then we can run it with Control R. And yeah, that looks like it worked. As you can see here, 50, 48, 46, 44. Let's just go up to the other end of the array just to make sure, or the other end of the printing just to make sure it started off right. Yep, so 0, 2, 4, 6. So it looks good.